Well, let's see here. As was mentioned in the just at the in passing in the last session, batteries are an interesting class of investment, but also potentially transformative to the grid. We want to dig into that a little bit here. Maybe we can start with you, Camilo. Atlas Renewable Energy. You're making a play in the battery space. Can you tell us what is the value that we can bring? I mean, generally speaking, it's a pretty sophisticated audience on energy. People get it. You know, we batteries, and in particular, I want to at least at the beginning, I want to, even though we have a Mercedes man on the session, he's a very unusual kind of Mercedes man. He likes the batteries that go with that don't go anywhere, if I'm not mistaken, right? You're not the kind that goes at 100 miles an hour on the Autobahn. And so we're going to talk about stationary uses of batteries and perhaps grid scale batteries. I think that's really the focus of a lot of interest. I wrote a story about the transformation that's happening in this area a few months ago, and my colleagues at The Economist who think generally that energy is boring and there's nothing more boring than batteries and the only thing more boring than batteries is someone at a cocktail party coming up to you saying, let me tell you about grid scale energy storage, right? Then you know you're at the bottom of the bottom of the bottom of the barrel. It was the number one story on the Economist website for 5 days running on the homepage at a time of geopolitical conflict, Trump and so on. And so people are interested because when you begin to look at the facts, the extraordinary price transformations that have been happening, the innovation, the geopolitics of it, the potential to transform, which I think we're going to hear about, the economics of renewables and the rollout at which and the investment models that are coming. I think that's really what's exciting here. So let's kick it off with you, Camilo. Give us your perspective on this.
Thank you. We are an independent power producer, very active in Latin America, and we're seeing right now is like the battery rush, like the gold rush, particularly in Chile, right? We think that the batteries are transforming the landscape because essentially what used to be an intermittency is becoming a more dispatchable asset. And this is very attractive to clients. We focus on industrial clients, and we're being able to actually provide a product that is more attractive to them at a very competitive price, right? You saw in the past years, solar product, the solar curve has come down in price significantly. This is a result of the lower technology cost. And we're seeing the same trend with the batteries, right? It's decreased 90% in the past 10 years. And we're being able to deliver to industrial intensive energy consumers a product that is very attractive. They don't want a solar curve. They want a product that satisfies their needs, that essentially produces the energy even during night, right? And the LCOEs have become tremendously competitive. We see getting to prices around $50 per megawatt hour, which is extremely competitive when you couple PV plus battery, right? So I think that's very interesting. Plus the other benefits, right? That it helps alleviate the curtailment. You're seeing when there's a massive penetration of renewables, curtailment starts to kick in. You're seeing that in Spain. You're seeing that in Chile, in Brazil. So it has an add-on benefit, right? Which becomes, I would say, it's a big problem that we're facing, and the batteries are helping to resolve that. So I think it's very attractive.
Just to be clear with what as far as what we're discussing, used to be we've had batteries for a long time. Of course, the economics have gotten much better, and the scaling of them is getting bigger. But when it comes to project development, what you're talking about, and matching them and pairing them, we've even had solar projects that have had a little bit of storage. But now we're talking about dramatically supersizing the storage. Am I right?
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit more about what's actually happening and how the scaling up of the energy storage is justified on a capex basis, because of course you have to put out more outlay, and what kind of regulatory regimes it makes sense in which to do that, because you need a payback. And so it can only make sense in certain, even though it might make metaphysical sense in everywhere in the world, we should be doing it so that you're not losing that, wasted solar that's curtailed. It only makes financial sense if there's an arbitrage opportunity. Am I right?
It definitely. The arbitrage has to be there, and also the capacity, right? Not every market has a capacity market, and the batteries usually they need three revenue streams to survive, right? The arbitrage is a big and important part of that. Then the capacity payment, which is a recognition from the grid that pays for the capacity being available, and then ancillary services, which is a smaller fraction of the revenues, and that helps to essentially the grid operator to mitigate any disruption or volatility in the
Regulating
frequency, right?
frequencies and so on.
Exactly,
Right.
exactly. So now what happened is,
Are you maintaining that you need all three to be economic, or it's helpful to
I
have
mean, it
three?
depends on your business
In
model, but
Texas, you
it
don't
is
have
helpful.
a capacity market, but it's one of the biggest battery markets in the world.
Which one?
Texas.
Yeah. I mean, it depends on your business model, right? And it depends also on what's your price differential at night and during day, right? And how risk averse you are, right? But usually you would, I mean, usually investors, they're looking for long-term predictable cash flows. So you would want to have some capacity payments there, right? That you can contract and you can know what your revenue stream is going to look like for 15 or 20 years, right? So I think what's happened is prices have come down significantly, and then regulation has moved forward. In many cases, there was already a capacity payment present in certain markets. They're developing that, for example, in Spain right now, right? There's been an announcement, it hasn't taken place yet, to be able to deploy massively the batteries, right? So I think it's a combination of obviously capex decrease and regulatory help somehow with the capacity.
It's a good point, jumping off point for you, Felipe. Felipe, you're looking at not only PV plus batteries, but you've also thought about them for off-grid solutions. We've mostly been discussing grid solutions. Can you take us down that road? What have you learned from your time in the Middle East and Africa? What are the opportunities for some of these big off-grid solutions?
Yes, sure. But I think, like Camilo said, the price has declined a lot. And just to give you an example, right now we can do a project of PV plus storage with a capex that is lower than the PV standalone 5-6 years ago. So it opens a world of opportunities to provide different kind of service. And the learning that we have taken from the market, we have been doing solar projects for almost 20 years, is that we need to evolve. Up to now, all the renewable companies like us was focusing just produce energy and put in the market as you produce with not energy management, any kind of energy solution for the customer. But now in this new paradigm of cheap batteries and capacity to manage the energy, we can evolve to accommodate our product to the customer demands. And right now, what we see, we have been talking about a lot of data centers. And what's the main problem for the data center right now? The access to the grid. It's extremely difficult, yet grid connections. We talk about 300, 500 megawatt base load in a data center. It is huge demand. Probably we come from Spain. Just one of the data centers will be the biggest energy consumer of the country, and they want to do a lot of them. So there are a lot of problems to accommodate to the grid. So if you put this together, the grid constraints that are delaying the deployment of the data center with the possibilities to provide advanced energy solutions for customers, we end in the conclusion that it's a clear opportunity to deploy, I don't want to say microgrid because we're talking about hundreds of megawatts, but private networks with their own generation to supply these new customers. And
Would it
with
be
this problem,
islanded?
Islanded.
Really, it's a bring your own power solution.
Yes, do a specific power solution for this kind of large energy consumers in a way that they don't have to wait for all these grid developments and compete, because it will take time, will be complex, and could put in risk their investment objectives.
And just to drill into this, since this is meant to be a conference that looks at the technology, let's get a little bit technical. The solution that's being put on the table for these AI data centers, you're talking about solar plus energy storage, appropriately scaled. Obviously, it deals, at least in part, with the intermittency problem. But does it deal with all of it, first of all? Do you still need a little gas on the side for backup or firming? And if so, what do you look at? Do you use peaker plants? How do you deal with it? Do you have connection from, the gas grid? How do you handle that?
We have to do a mix. Probably we will have like 5,000 hours or something like that coming from the renewable with the solar plus batteries on, and the rest will come from a thermal engine that will have the redundancy and so on. So it's a mixed solution, and always thinking in the future, because like I always got saying, the hydrogen, the ammonia energy solution are not still there,
Right.
but probably we think will come in the future. So you can have this
use gas.
dual engine that
Yeah.
now is working with gas, but tomorrow could start to work with ammonia. And you can see in different countries that there are already a pilot project of turbines of 30, 50 megawatts capacity working with ammonia. So you have this flexibility to now be not pure decarbonized, but do a solution that in 5-10 years time could be full decarbonized solution for these large data centers.
Right. So it's meant to be the bridge. That
Yeah.
this is
Covering, yeah.
and it's only feasible, again, you're predominantly relying on the solar plus the energy storage.
Yeah.
This is for the firming, and if you have some, additional need for the intermittency to deal with, and you don't buy a very expensive combined cycle gas turbine from Siemens or GE. Not that you can get one for 5 years, right? The backlog is huge. Vernova tells me it's 5 years to get a CCGT, but because the capex would be so great, you'd have gas lock-in. With these smaller turbines, in 5 years, you can see it as a bridge fuel,
Yes.
and then you replace it with what comes next, and we'll have to figure out what that is. Ammonia may be one solution; other people have other solutions. This is the basic concept.
Yeah,
right?
this is the basic
An
concept.
interim solution, but that's mostly green. Ultimately, getting to full green. That's how we're looking at it.
Yes, and always having in mind that the technology evolution allows us to do this kind of customized solution, customized green energy solution, and it's really the challenge that the renewable developers have in the table right now. Understand what's the necessities and the demand from the customer, and define products to meet that.
Got it. Now, Frank, I want to come to you. Of course, everyone here knows Mercedes. You're head of charging solutions in energy there, but you're also involved at a senior level with Enbase, which does stationary batteries. So I'm curious to know, give us your perspective here. I'm hearing a lot of buzz about the potential for recycled batteries from the EV industry serving as the bundled energy source for grid scale energy. Tell us what's the reality here.
I think we started very early, about 8 years ago, when we had the first electric smarts, the first generation run out of service, and then we got in contact with a company called the Mobility House, and they told us, if you anytime have spare batteries, talk to us, we might do something meaningful with it. And then we together founded a joint venture. This is Enbase, and put 2,000 to 3,000 smart batteries together to one big storage, and built this company.
What's the size of this big battery?
It's on 2 locations, about 26 megawatt hours.
Okay.
It's 2/3 is really second use.
Right.
1/3 is so-called spare part storage. So if you have
What does that spare part storage mean?
if you have a car which is still with a customer and you stop producing the batteries,
Right.
you have to make sure that the customer still gets spare parts
Oh, I see.
when you didn't continue producing these batteries, and then you have to store the batteries. And as you know, you can't put the battery just on a storage and leave it there for 12 years, then it's dead. And then we said, okay, together with our battery technicians, what is the best way in storing batteries? And we found out the best way is doing FCR, so frequency containment reserve, in a very defined SOC and power level.
I see.
And so we said, okay, yes, we do 9 megawatt hours of battery storage for a special kind of cars. And the other one is really second use from this run out.
And the insight behind the second use, is the basic idea that these second use batteries would probably not be accepted for a new vehicle.
Exactly.
for some reason. And is there a technical reason why they're not good enough, or is it to do with consumer confidence and trust, or maybe insurance reasons?
I think it's these first the batteries we used there were batteries from a first test fleet, and this test fleet was meant to run for a certain duration,
Right.
and then was planned to scrap them.
Right.
And we saved the batteries from being scrapped and utilized them in this in the second use storage. Usually, you expect that the battery is okay for mobility down to about 70-75% state of health. And so far, if you look at the passenger car side, nearly no battery in driving reaches that level. So usually they are all better, and I would bet that probably 80-90% of the batteries are better. Even if the car has end of life, the battery will more sustain. And that is the interesting thing. What we learned with the stationary storage, we have now the batteries which have been in a car for one car life, and now we have them since 8 years in the stationary operation. And what we experience is that the degradation of the battery cells is extremely low. So we don't see any. We haven't had one cell where we had to say, okay, we have to get rid of that battery because the degradation of the cell.
So even in secondary life, the degradation is low. Is it because you manage the cycling so well?
We manage the cycling well. We keep them at a decent temperature level.
Right.
But we do see that the cells are really very robust if we keep them at that level. Of course, they have much little stress compared to driving.
Right.
But we expect that they will last another 5 years at minimum.
So now that you've talked about how durable batteries are and how they've improved in a sense, or we know how to manage them, answer me this. It used to be in the early days when people talked about vehicle-to-grid charging, one of the big ideas that our friends at Kraken and others hope to see more of, bringing demand flexibility to grids. That idea did not have a lot of fans among the auto industry. And the electric vehicle industry, because of course, if your electric vehicle gets you from point A to point B and charges nicely and keeps you happy, the car maker is happy. But if you use it to make money on the side, selling into the grid because Kraken will help you time shift, that might be good for the grid. It might be good for the consumer. It's not particularly good for the EV company because there'll be some battery degradation and you'll blame the car company saying, my car is crap, this battery's terrible. And you get nothing from it. There's no payback for the car company. That used to be the story. What's changed? Are you guys on the vehicle-to-grid bandwagon now? Is it the quality of batteries is improved, or our state of knowledge is improved? Or are you still a little skeptical about the vehicle-to-grid concept?
I'm personally not skeptical about it.
No, but I mean the company and the industry.
I definitely believe in it. I think we still we do see a lot of positive aspects. I think we learned from that stationary storage what you can earn with batteries, providing flexibility to the grid. And we heard from the colleagues that in Australia people have negative energy bills. So I think with V2G you are quite close to come to negative energy bills or zero cost for charging.
That's right.
So that is a big benefit, and the customer will ask for that. So I think there is probably no option not to do that. Then for an OEM, the question, what should we do? Should we try to block it? Should we try to allow it? Should we try to become a player in it?
Right.
That is still a strategic discussion, but I personally work more on the direction that we should become a player in it. And then the second topic is that what you mentioned, battery degradation.
Right.
And from my point of view, it's two or three aspects. One is trust of the customer. Second is really experience. What does a V2G battery really see? If you look at a car and you drive a car, and I must object you, I still drive fast with an EV, even 100 miles per hour, and I enjoy it. But in a car, you easily have 100 kilowatt, 200 kilowatt of power you draw out of an energy. You do fast charging with up to 200, in future up to 350, 400 kilowatt. So really stress the battery. If you have the battery connected to your home, you have 11 in Germany, you have 3-phase 11 kilowatt. That's the standard energy you can pull out of the battery. You can charge the battery. So it's really being very gentle to the battery. you can't control what SOCs, what state of charge levels you see.
Right.
So you will never discharge it completely. You will never charge it completely.
Right.
It's even an advantage compared to usual charging,
Right.
because you avoid charging to 100% and then leaves the car there. That is known. That is very harmful to the battery. And then it's always, I must admit, it's an ongoing discussion with our battery engineers, because they want to save their battery and we shouldn't touch it.
Right.
Others say usually that kind of battery usage shouldn't be so bad to the battery. In the end, it should have nearly no effect on battery degradation. I think that is something we will learn in the next 5 years. And in the beginning, it's, from my point of view, our task that we provide the trust to the customers, that we will make sure that the batteries will be treated in a way that they have no effect on mobility.
Right. So it seems to me, reading between the lines, that the technical issues have gone. It's really a question of maybe some agreement on business model, on protocols, and with today's software, we could probably find a way to make this work if there was the desire and intent from the car companies.
I think from a technical perspective, you can do it more or less right now. I think
Right.
the protocol is there.
Yeah.
We will have the cars in the next years in the market, which are bidirectional. We heard from other speakers, there are still regulatory topics in the market,
Right.
which has to be solved in Germany, starting with the smart meter rollout, but as well double taxation for stored energy and level playing field with stationary storages. But
Yeah.
that is something we are working on. I'm convinced that in let's say 2 years we will have commercial offers in the market
Excellent.
in a certain scale.
Okay, we'll hold you to that. I want to come to any questions from the floor. We have, let's go in the back there, hand I hadn't picked on before. Let's make it a good question, and please identify yourself. No pressure.
Thank you. Terrific panel. Philippe Burke with Apache Capital in New York. I was curious if you could comment on progress being done in solid state batteries, in particular, the really low cost, like using solar panel to heat rocks and sand, and then anything, about that. Thank you.
So I think the solid state may have two different meanings here. There's a solid state, that are very long-range batteries are being developed for transportation in cars, and then there's literally rocks in a box, like the heat batteries at Rondo, Antora. I was just at Antora in California a few days ago, looking at that kind of solid-state battery. So let's see if the panel wants to comment on either one. Solid state. Maybe one of you, are either of you working with the
No,
solid
we're
state
not.
batteries?
We're not. We're using lithium. Well, no.
You just lithium-based?
Yeah.
See, at the end of the day, with stationary batteries energy, we will not take the value that a solid state will provide, because we don't need this kind of safety or extra long duration.
Right.
And
It's not a
so
market
will
requirement
come
for
in
you.
the future with the cost reduction, but not
Right.
in the short term. There are a lot of ways to improve the conventional lithium batteries before go to this
Right.
point.
There's a lot of enthusiasm about solid state as a next generation for transport. What do you think?
I think we are of course doing development work, and we are invested in a solid state company as Mercedes-Benz. So we look at it, but finally the question is, what range do you really need,
Right.
and at what cost do you get it?
600 miles. That's what I want.
Yeah, I think I join you.
Yeah. At 100 miles an hour, you may be leading. I'll have to follow you.
Yeah, and I think we do have pilots running with solid states and
Yeah.
testing it out. But finally, the commercial side has to work.
Yeah.
And I can't give you a clear answer.
There's a few, obviously, there's competitors. QuantumScape, the Japanese have some technology here. There's
okay,
a few people working
there's
on this.
A few people working on it. On the other side, we see that we have good progress with LFP batteries, which are rather cheap.
Right.
And I would see probably you see it rather at us than in others, because premium cars can afford and
Right.
customers are willing to buy it.
Yeah.
If it will finally be the game changer, I think that is a question of how much down do we get the cost.
Right. And on the other kind of solid states, I have a huge soft spot in my heart for anything that tackles the problem of industrial heat, which is one of the hardest problems in climate, in steel and other hard to abate sectors. And there is a real promise that so-called heat batteries or can help with industrial electrification. And so that is another way of storing heat as a solid. And there's different ways to go. There's just plain rocks, or the stuff that's used in blast furnaces, the cement blocks that have been used for decades and decades. That's Rondo is a different competitor. There's people are using tin and novel materials, ceramics. So there's a huge innovation happening in this very boring corner. I mean, forget grid scale energy batteries. You say, I want to talk to you about rocks in a box. That's really when you know that the guy who wants to talk about grid scale batteries leaves the party. Let's see if we can get one more question in before we run out of time. How about on this side?
Hello, I'm Alexander Landia from the Mobility House, and thank you, Frank, for mentioning that. But I've got a question for Camilo. Well, when Frank and we started working on all the things that are on battery, the usual cycle assumption for a battery was 1,200 cycles. Now, today in China, you get LFP batteries, which cost probably around $85 per kilowatt hour, and they can run 16,000 cycles. Now, what does that do to your calculation of $50 per megawatt hour? Thank you.
A quick answer.
It improves. That's a quick answer.
That's a quick answer. It improves it. Okay. The one last question from Slido asked about swappables batteries. Obviously, it's been a great concept. Early efforts like Project Better Place failed. They were too early, maybe. The Israeli company from 20 years ago, 15 years ago. But if you, when I went to India about a year and a half ago to visit the chairman of Indian Oil, he said nothing but India is going to become the #1 net additional consumer of oil in the world within a couple of years, surpassing China. It's about to happen. At the same time, he said, I'm going to install EV charging at all my petrol stations across India. And I went downstairs and what I saw blew me away. A year and a half ago, a three-wheeler was getting battery swapped out from a lorry that had come along using a smartphone, paid for it in less than 2 minutes, had swapped his battery. And that, again, it's almost a couple of years ago, the EV powered rickshaw was on his way. And like that, there's a revolution happening in the developing world with two-wheelers and three-wheelers that's now been noted. So I think we can take a page out of that. When will it come to cars? Good question. But, EVs in two-wheelers and three-wheelers are a huge source of mobility for the developing world. So we can look to inspiration for frugal engineering solutions as well. With that, please give my battery gurus a round of applause. Thank you, gentlemen.